Welcome back to YouDecide 2007's coverage of the federal election. This is where you report the election, and we're just about to talk about the public opinion polls that are published in the newspapers every day. They're aggregations of what people all around Australia tell pollsters, so this is very much what you decide about the election. So the first poll that we've got here is the News Poll. News Poll is conducted in association with The Australian, and we've got two dots at the beginning there which represent the situation as of last election, where the Liberal Party got around 52% of the vote. Then we start the graph up again in November last year, where that's about a month before Kevin Rudd became leader of the Labor Party, and something very interesting then happens. It's a bit like a pair of nutcrackers. The graph opens up, closes down a little bit, then it opens up. And it goes along, and there's basically not very much fluctuation in there. Now, John, we were talking about the technical issues that go with polling. There's a thing called sampling error. Could you just explain what sampling error tells you about this graph?
Well, one of the things about sampling error, Graham, is that on a normal news poll, it's about 3.5%, plus or minus 3.5%. So when you get the primary vote, you then have to recognise that you can only be 90% confident that that's within 3 to 3.5% of being accurate either way. And so if there's a shift in the poll, say from 56% to 57%, that's really within the margin of error. So essentially, not much has happened, and you really can't be definitive about saying, oh yes, you know, they're up 1%. Well, they may be and they may not be.
So looking at this graph, how confident are you that the ALP is that far ahead?
I'm quite confident the ALP is ahead, but not as much as that, because when you account for the margin of error, the gap is really, across the 12 months, is really about 6%. Now, the interesting thing is that Rudd actually needs a bit more than 6% across the nation to get over the line. So, you know,
6%, but back here we've got him on 48. 6% is 54%.
6%.
Is 54% not enough to?
6% between the Conservatives and the Labor Party is.
So you think he needs what, 53% of the vote to win?
No, he needs a gap between himself on the two-party preferred base. He needs a gap between himself and the Conservatives of 6% plus. I mean, Warwick probably knows more about the actual stats. And of course, the problem about opinion polls is that they are, News Poll, for example, is based on 1,200 people nationally. Now, that's statistically reliable, but when you get down to individual seats, it really does get a bit fraught. And Queensland has always been the Bush has always been underrepresented. You really can't, in my view, use a poll like News Poll or Morgan, which of course is notoriously the most inaccurate poll in Australia, on the political landscape in Australia. You can't use the national polls to apply them to seats, to particular seats.
Okay, you can't do that, but why don't we look at Morgan now, because they don't have a sample of 1,000, they've got a sample of 5,000 that they've used to analyse.
And that may well be because they've copped a beating about their predictive value in the past. They may well have upped their sample size. And
they've also split it up into city and country, which might meet one of your other criticisms there. And when we look at this graph, the Labor Party votes strongest in Queensland. Dale, is that your feeling, that Queenslanders you travel around the place a bit? You're originally from Sydney. Are Queenslanders really that hooked on to Kevin Rudd? And if they are, why?
I'm sure there's a statistical error in the company that I keep, Graham. You know,
a twinkle in the eye. It's a statistical error now, is it?
I feel very strongly that people whom I would have thought would have been sympathetic to the coalition are actually saying things like it's time for a change. Now, whether that translates into something, I'm not sure, but I do think there's a widespread sense that we need something different, and we need something. I mean, the big issue is always about climate change and education and health, aren't they? They're the things that people think need changing.
I'm on a different page, I think. Maybe it's because my group of friends and associates sample the other way increasingly these days. But I think what we've got to be careful of in using the polls is the extent to which those national poll numbers are reflected in individual seats. The key is to understand who's swinging and where they are concentrated, where they live. Let's not forget the name of the game in federal elections is to win the majority of the two-party preferred vote in the majority of seats. It's not about winning the national vote. It's about the majority of votes in the majority of seats. And I believe that Labor needs to win at least 52% of the national two-party preferred vote to win a majority of seats. Howard can get in on this election with 48% of the vote, just scrape in. And it really depends on where the swings are. Now, what's happening in Queensland? Well, I think there is a swing to Kevin, and it's for lots of reasons. That there is obviously a swing across the country amongst some people. Large proportions of people are swinging that way. Who are they? Well, I would suggest that the first group of people who are swinging towards Kevin are people who were in the lower income spectrum, who were welfare recipients, who strongly supported the Howard government over the last 10 years, but have now been pushed into the working environment as a result of the government's welfare to work program, and they're not real happy about it. They're coming back. They're resenting that imposition from government, pushing them back into the workforce under some pretty tough working conditions. Is that enough to get Kevin over the line? Well, you know, he needs to get swings of 8% in Queensland to be a show. He needs to win seats like Herbert in North Queensland to be able to win the election, and that's a 7+% seat.
And are there enough doctors' wives out there who are going to vote for Kevin?
Well, I think it's not just doctors' wives, but they're actually
You're saying
the
it's not doctors'
themselves.
wives at all?
Well,
aren't
no,
you?
that's the other group. I think there is a large group of high-income earners.
And
too.
by doctors' wives, I mean, is it gender specific? I mean, is it
Well, I think it
just
is.
females or?
Well, I think it is.
I thought it was
And-
a euphemism for some of the men who married to doctors.
Well, no, well, that's what I think it actually is too, in that a lot of them are actually female professionals. It's not that they're married to a male professional. The people who are swinging to Kevin are female professionals,
Education, health, yeah.
right? And where are they highly concentrated? In traditionally safe Liberal seats and in some coastal areas. So they're very concentrated in pockets. Kevin will do very well, for example, in seats like Griffith. He will continue
Well,
to
you'd
do
hope
very
so. He's a
well.
local member.
He will
He's given away
continue to
200
do well.
bicycles in Griffith.
What about
Yeah, but the
Ryan?
same story could go for Howard. You'd say, well, he should do well in Bennelong because he's a local member, but we talk about demographic change in that seat,
Yeah.
right? And it's becoming wealthier. And the irony is that the Labor Party is the one that's starting to pick up the better educated, higher income groups, and it's done that since 2001.
So what about a seat like Ryan then? If you're looking at Brisbane, there's 3 inner city seats, aren't there? There's Griffith, there's Brisbane and there's Ryan. Well, 2 of them are held by the Labor Party. Are they going to make it 3 out of 3?
I think they could. I think Ryan is one of those seats where demographically the Labor Party is... What we've seen in the last 10 years is a demographic shift. In the US it happened about 100 years ago when blue-collar workers who used to vote Republican switched to the Democrats. In Australia, we've traditionally had a class-based voting pattern up until probably the early 80s. And progressively, we've seen it starting to get a role reversal. The Labor Party is appealing to the inner city gentry, far more so than the Liberal Party. The Liberal Party has, for a long time, for the last 10, 15 years, been the party of the lower income, and the National Party has been the party for the really low income earners.
The farmers.
The farmers? But are there any working class seats that are Liberal?
Yeah,
Some of
outer
those
burbs.
Sunshine Coast seats. Some of the Sunshine Coast
It's
seats.
the outer burbs. They used to
Yep.
be working class,
Right,
and
Nala.
now they're
Woodridge.
Well,
You'd be
Petrie.
pretty safe as a Labor Party candidate there, getting your
Well, you would
deposit
be.
back, wouldn't you? And
The
a
groups-
pension at the end of your 3 terms?
The seats where they're going to have difficulties, seats like Longman, where there was a lot of trade workers, in the old days were union members. And what have they done in the last 10 years? Post-Keating, they've become contractors, small business people, self-employed, income splitters, McMansion livers.
Okay, so in summary, it's a big swing. Is it sustainable and is it enough? Warwick, yes, no?
Difficult to sustain. It needs to stay where it is for Kevin to win. He should win in a canter on these numbers, but his challenge will be holding that vote when self-interest kicks in the outer burbs.
John?
No,
Canter or a
I
gallop?
think he'll do it in a canter. I think he'll do it in a canter because I think the government's continuing to stuff things up as we go. And it's still very early days, but if we have too many more interest rate hikes and too many more worm fiascos, the government's vote will actually fall away.
And Dale, you backing the polls?
Oh, look, I just don't want to jinx it.
Well, it sounds like Kevin's got at least 1 vote. You live in Griffith, don't you?
So do I. He's got my vote too.